Dr. Jazz. Dr. Jazz.
You know, you just recently released the solo bass record, Irvin's Comet, for No Business Records, for the Lithuanian label. And, you know, Symmetries, your solo bass from 20 years ago now, it's one of my favorite records because it's, you know, I love the bass. I mean, I'm a guitarist, but I love what you do on the bass. And I just wanted to ask you, how do you fully improvise, and what's your approach on a solo bass, either concert or recording? Like, how do you approach a 50-minute or 1 hour and 15 minutes concert of solo bass performance? Like, what's your idea? How do you set it up?
Well, I suppose the first thing that one has to say is that the space in which you inhabit as a bass player is quite important. You've got to get I'm kind of interested in the acoustics and how they work. So let's say there are, I don't really go necessarily into a concert space with ideas ready set. I do have obviously some sound areas I would be interested in researching according to the space if it allows me. But I mean, for instance, with Irvin's Comet, that was, I had been working on a few things at home, and I thought, well, we're going to be in this, we got into this recording space there, and it was very generous. And I thought, well, this, I can do quite a lot of things here, which will be, I think it's the fine details of the playing, which are kind of interesting in a space. But for me, one of the important things I've always tried to do on the bass is to investigate kind of what I call resonance, rather than just, what I don't want to be is a kind of a circus act, you know?
Yeah, sure.
But you know, we have extended techniques for the bass, and as indeed every other instrument that I've worked with, everybody's been sort of kind of working on how their instrument functions, either with other people or in a solo context. I'm kind of interested to always a solo concert is that moment to research that acoustic space. So there are different ways of approaching it. Sometimes I will have a couple of heads, just perhaps little tunes I've been working on. That opens the door to a particular type of investigation. There's all the extended tools that I use, you know, either rods or needles or brushes. I like these to be integrated within the whole kind of, if you want to call it improvisation stroke compositional pattern. A lot of it is, particularly when you start adding sticks and brushes and rods to your instrument, there's a certain there's a risk, because they always want to go wrong. You know, you get it in your eye or something, or it falls out, or but this is, funny enough, I see this as a really big challenge. You know, I say, are you going to be kind to me today, rods? Are you going to oscillate in a nice way, or are you just going to make some terrible sounds? But whatever happens, I sort of throw myself into it, and in a way, it's I can't say it's a silent partner, but it is an alter ego. If you think of these things doing their thing, I activate them, they do their thing, I have to react. So in Irvin's Comet, for instance, I did have a couple of ideas of pacing over the period of the concert. Exactly. You know, I don't want to play the same stuff all the time, so I like to change the colors but work on the resonances. So these perhaps unusual sounds are integrated into the normal sounds of the bass. It's not just I'm going out there to say, hey guys, look what I can do. You know, it's not to do with that. It's to do with the bass. You know, it's the feedback from the instrument. And I like to take some risks in these recitals. So in Symmetries, for instance, that was a slightly different situation because that was a recorded situation. I mean, a studio. Yeah. So let's say I came armed with certain perhaps strategies which would be appropriate for that particular album in that particular time with time.
Yeah.
And I haven't really made that many solo albums, but there is, I don't know whether you've heard that there is one. One second. There's, now there's this. I don't know whether you know this one. It's called Frogs.
No,
and
I don't know this
it's
one.
a tiny. Well, it's me thinking of outside influences. We have a sort of a large pond, biotope outside the house here, right?
Yeah.
And it's inhabited by these little fellows, these frogs.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
The green ones, and they make a lot of noise. But there's also some European tree frogs, and these frogs, they make a completely different sound. They hang around in the trees or on the margins of the pond, and they have a sound like. Whereas these guys going. So we have this kind of. It's like a concert. At certain times of the year, these guys just make so much noise. So I was kind of interested because these little frogs, they normally get underway when they hear an aeroplane, which is kind of odd that they should.
The frequency.
A low frequency of an aeroplane. Or we're in the farming country around here, so there will be tractors coming by or a motorbike or something like that. And they get motivated and they start making a load of noise, which is kind of odd, isn't it? You know, these natural creatures suddenly being activated by man-made manifestations, flying or running along the ground. So I was interested to see whether they would react to a bass. So,
oh wow, man!
Sort of at the right time, just at dusk, I took the bass out. I took our little mini recorder out, placed it in front of the bass, and I started scraping away. And these guys started making a lot of noise. But what I have to admit, they probably didn't listen to a single note I was making, because they just did their thing anyway. So when I stopped, they carried on, you know. So when I started, but it was a very nice sort of counterpoint to a little improvisation. So we had this recording just as a, I suppose it was just an experiment. And anyway, Maya, for my birthday, I can't remember which one it was. Must be 70th probably. She, with Mats Gustafsson, she worked out how we might put these frog recordings on an EP, and this is it. Wow. So it's really quite strange. So that's why it's called Frogs. So
incredible.
So it keeps us busy. You can't do concerts in concert halls these days. At least I can play with the frogs, you know. That's all. So anyway, that was a sort of an. Your internet connection is unstable. Okay.
It's like I hear you. But you said you know now concerts, and I wanted to ask you, when did you do your first solo bass concert? Was that in the 70s already? Like.
Yes. Yes. I suppose it took in the 70s. It sort of took two forms. Mm-hmm. I was very much involved in London with the contemporary music scene, what we call the straight scene, and I was playing a lot of pieces written for the solo double bass. I mean, Theraps from Xenakis, for instance. There was Memo one from Bernard Rands, who was a composing friend of mine who was a professor up at York University, and I played in his ensemble. So, you know, one thing led to another. So I found myself actually doing quite a lot of solo straight music concerts, which actually developed into a kind of music theater scenario where various publishers sent me pieces, some of them which were definitely sort of linked to a theatrical scenario, but also there was a piece which actually I suppose set my mind wondering about whether a music theatre recital could work. Was the piece Valentine by Jacob Druckmann, American composer, and he wrote this piece originally for 2 dancers and a double bass player, and that was the Joffrey Ballet played that initially and or worked on it, and with the solo bassist on stage with 2 dancers kind of orbiting around the bass and bass. So it was a nice concept. So it's an amazing piece because it was using a lot of the techniques that I was working on. I extended use of mallets on the strings, vocal interjections, as well as the kind of the usual bowed stuff, pizzicato stuff. But it was kind of interesting because he was kind of morphing the vocal sounds and percussion sounds, morphing into real sound, real bass sounds. So it was this kind of moving in and out of these different types of resonance. And what I decided to do was to make a version of this. Obviously, I didn't have 2 dancers to work with, so I decided you say it was basically was like fucking the bass in the end, you know, because that's exactly what it is. I met Druckmann and I said, "What do you mean by this?" And he said, "Well, that's screwing. You know, that's screwing the bass." So okay, I'll screw the bass then. And that was a particular point where you have to put the stick between the strings, and it goes, and well, it doesn't need much imagination to realize what that meant. And anyway, in my score, I've got Jacob's markings, and so I decided to dress up in a red leotard. Now, I had been working in the 70s, I've been working with the London Contemporary Dance Theatre. I was working a lot with dancers on stage with them, me playing the bass, them doing the dancing. And I found it absolutely invigorating, mind-wise as well as body-wise. Because, you know, I had to I was being integrated into the dance. And Robert Cohan, who came from Martha Graham School, had to come to England, taken over the company and did a lot of choreography. And then he started pulling me on stage with the dancers, which actually meant I wanted to understand how the dancers work, where the energy comes from. So this was also affected some ideas about the bass playing, about transference of energy from, instead of just standing there with a bass, what you want to do is to kind of get that moment of where the energy is under the fingertips. So I realized that these ladies and gentlemen were in their preparation for certain moves. They had to kind of work together where the energy fields sort of came together, so they could do a lift. I couldn't come over and lift you up like that. Right? But if we did this together, we might actually elevate. You know, that was the kind of idea that the energy comes into the sound, into the resonance, the sound, the fingerboard, whatever you want to do, but you have to aim at that point. So what I wanted to do with Valentine was to dress up in a red leotard, since this came sort of directly from the dancers I'd worked with. I knew all the, where they buy all their dance stuff. And we had we developed a scenario with red lights and like a bordello. It was basically. So basically, it was a music theatre presentation of this piece of me screwing the bass, basically. And then in the same program, I would have the piece I mentioned by Bernard Rand's Memo 1. He had this idea. In fact, we made the first performance in one of his. He had this ensemble called Sonar, and I played in the solo piece, and he had a spotlight on the ground, which actually sort of delivered shadow. We did it in university, delivered a shadow like Godzilla, you know, sort of climbing or whatever, you know, the huge shadow of a bass player on the back wall, which was kind of nice. So I'd be thrashing away, and then the audience would see me diminutive like that, and back there was this great monster, you know,
Amazing.
And he was integrating voice as well into the piece, in his pieces, and so what came together. I'm still talking about the solo recital, but all this is sort of coming together. You can imagine that we've got Shadows, we've got Bordello, Xenakis, what was it, 72, came along with Theraps, and I worked with him on that. I went to Paris a couple of times to work with him on that, and we discussed a lighting scenario, and his idea. He agreed that what should happen. It will be a brilliant white light, almost steel or ice white, you know. So we've got the red of the Bordello, we've got the shadow, and we've got this ice white Xenakis piece, and so I developed. There was a couple of other pieces that came along where we got a little bit more subtle in the lighting. So this was the solo bass scenario I was working on. So that was all very exciting, and you know, all the influences were coming either from composers, dancers, lighting. Oh, there was also a great piece called Hubert Stuckner wrote a piece called Rondo for a Clown, and basically it was the usual clown scenario. If you go on stage and you fail mightily, you know. So we actually put together another. I mean, I had my hair long and sort of crazy, like Back to the Future. Was that film?
Yeah. Sure.
And with a clown's uniform, or with a tail was all torn and everything. But I would enter the side of the stage. Maya actually helped me out on this one eventually, by as I developed it. When she came along, she a lot later, but we developed this even more because she did the spotlight for the clown. This became actually a much more sort of integrated theatre recital. And I would come on the stage with a big pile of bows, and of course the usual thing happens: you fall over, you get wrapped up in the music stands, the music goes everywhere. So got more and more crazy. I think I did it in Budapest once, and it was part of one of these solo recitals. This was doing the spotlight, but it was in the foyer of the concert hall, and everybody was sitting around, and I did the usual thing. I had to had a bowl to put my makeup on at the side and do the hair, and I sort of came in through one of the doors into the foyer with all my bows. And the first thing the clown does is to fall over. You know, he trips over. So that's the start of the piece, sort of thing. And it has an electronic tape, or it's actually a pre-recorded tape of the double bass. I think it's sped up 4 times or something. So it's completely manic shit going on behind. And I come in, and the bows disappeared, and they went under everybody's legs. And I didn't have a single bow to play the piece because they had all slid along the floor, and there was my audience, and I was sort of looking up and thinking, oh, can someone find me a bow, please? You know, there's a bow down there, way back there. So someone handed me a bow, so I managed the piece. But so this is this aspect of playing the bass. Not only was it extending the repertoire, as I was more and more into it, I had to deal with all these rather strange requests by composers, but also I was developing the use of extra tools, sounds, you know. So when this was the sort of the Jekyll and Hyde life, I was also improvising with the improvising guys, and they were extending their repertoire, about the instrumental repertoire. So it seemed to be completely okay to move into the free improv area, and with all of these kind of wonderful sounds which have been developing. So, and it doesn't take much to say or to realize that you can do a complete recital without all of the composition.
Sure.
So anyway, that's I think that does that answer your question a bit?
Yeah, amazing. Yeah.
Okay.
For me, it's fascinating. You know, when I started playing solo concerts.
Yeah.
Before the Corona lockdown, and a little bit before, like a couple of years. And for me, it was always scary in a way because you're alone on stage, you know, and it's like you have to think about how to approach a concert. That's why I'm asking you. You know, with the bass, it's also like, you know, it's you playing. It's like playing chess with yourself when you're improvising for 1 hour and 15 minutes. It's really a delicate situation. Yeah.
But I think sometimes the instrument tells you which way to go.
Yeah.
Once you're underway, certain things happen, and if you have a you connect up all these things, and on a good day, it will take you. The instrument will take you, and because you know we have all these natural resonances. I can see your guitar hanging up there. You know, there's so many wonderful sounds inside that instrument, and you know, I'm thinking of guitarists. I've been working with an Irish composer, professor, guitarist, and Benjamin Dwyer. I mean, he's what he's doing on the guitar now is really quite astounding. And but I realize, you know, I mean, sometimes I think he's going to pull the instrument apart, but if they have an amazing ability to survive, you know, your instrument.
Yeah, sure.
But you just have to be careful. That's it. Yeah.
Sure. No, but speaking of improvisation, I wanted to ask you this. You mentioned Mats Gustafsson before, and I know you did that album Frogging years ago. That's 15 years ago, and you did stuff with talking about duos with Evan Parker and Peter Kowald, and obviously with Maya, and you know, the one with Peter Evans, I love. It's so intense. It's just incredibly intense. But you coming from the UK and playing with all these incredible musicians and improvisers, do you see like a different approach in general, like between improvisations, like let's say the New York school or the Scandinavian school, and how do you approach all these impros within your thinking and playing and with them and basically solo?
Well, I suppose first thing is I've never really made any decisions about stylistic difference, say between the Scandinavians, the Americans.
No, sure. But if you feel them, kind of, that's the.
Well, there's certain things early on. I realized that if you're dealing with, you know, I noticed there was a difference, say, between what Evan Parker was doing and what Brotzman was doing, Peter Brotzman was doing.
Yeah.
And they have similar approaches, but they have a slightly different way of forming the music or informing the music, you know, by their instrumental extensions. Mats, you see, I met at a very Solo 92. I think I met Mats for the first time, and Raymond Street. And this is where, after that occasion, we put together the trio. But I thought Mats was actually a young, really original, such an original saxophone player. But I realized that he had he had listened to a lot of Brotzman, he had listened to a lot of Parker, but he had found his own way. And I think this is the important thing with this kind of world music. You just have to negotiate the individual's character as well as the kind of the musicianship. So yes, I suppose that I've mostly been involved with the kind of European school, but you know, as you mentioned in one of your questions, that there was Bill Dixon, Cecil Taylor, and so you know, when these opportunities came along, it was never any. I was never sort of being in a compromising situation to think, oh, these big Americans are playing, and in a way, you just go in there and just let your mind not go blank, but you just have to react to what you hear.
Yeah.
And it was, needless to say, to have a chance to play with Cecil was just extraordinary, as well as Bill Dixon, But Bill had very particular, for instance, those recordings that we made with
Vademecum,
Vademecum. He had very clear ideas what he wanted to do on the trumpet, and the use of the microphones as sort of sound generators in a way. And we were left with Oxley and
William.
We were kind of left to decode or find our way around it ourselves, But Bill would say sometimes, I would like this. I would just like to say one bass there, no drums, or two basses alone. Or there were moments that with Cecil, it was different because when those with the quartet with Oxley and Evan, there was, as far as I remember, don't think there was anything prescribed there. But we just had a couple of what you call rehearsals, which seemed to go on for an hour or something.
Yeah,
I had a lot of energy. But with the 10-piece band, it was he had his compositions. They were on the piano, and he was and basically what you had to do was to remember what he said. He would play something, and then you had to try and either remember it or write down in a kind of a graphic way. And so it was an intense and difficult process, I must say, but it was it was his way of putting a composition together, bringing together 10 guys, or it was 10 guys. Yeah, I think it was 10. Yeah. And mobilizing everybody within the context of his musical ideas. So you just had to find your own way of remembering it or decoding it. But then what used to happen was that on the next day of the rehearsals, he would change it all. So once you thought you got it, and let's start the piece, and then he would say, "No, I don't want that. Let's do this. Let's do that. Let's do that." So you get a razor out and sort of get rid of all. That everybody was kind of hanging on, definitely trying to find their space within his concept, and I think that was in itself is a particular compositional gambit. It's a way of putting the music together, and I think Mingus was a bit like that with his band. Sometimes, I mean, he would just shout out things. You play something on the piano. If you didn't get it, you were out, or you're punched, or whatever. Jimmy Nepper, I think, got that one. And so, but that's it's a way of doing things, which is, let's say, it's conceptual from somebody like Mingus. He had so many great ideas, and if you could hang in there, it would be good, But so the difference is, you were asking about Scandinavians, Americans, and Brits, or Netherlands, or Germany, Japan. You just have to go in there and take it as it's thrown at you, and try and go in with almost a blank canvas and take everything in as quick as possible. I think because the music is universal, improvisations it's a world language, but sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes you get the wrong pairings. Sometimes it's magical. And for instance, with John and that, when we made that duo album, I mean, he tended on that concert. Not everybody liked it because it was a lot of fast stuff on it. We were playing really, interaction. We were both hyper. We were
it was really.
So and it was sparks going all the time. And I think there was maybe one track where we kind of slowed down a bit, but I know there was, I think one Swiss reviewer said nobody ever listened to each other, but you know, I can tell you the intensity of the listening was so fast and so quick to be quick reactions. It was just amazing, and the guy is a monster, you know.
Yeah, he's amazing. Yeah.
So
no, but it's just like you know, when you improvise.
John, I meant Peter. I'm talking.
Peter Evans. Yeah. Now it's just like when you improvise. Not of course that you would feel the distinctions, but like there are like different approaches when I listen to, like you said, Peter and Evan or whoever, like Mats.
Yeah.
But not that you would say like, okay, this is no him, but yeah, maybe feeling wise, some people improvise. It's personality connected, I would say. Also how you improvise and. Probably.
Yeah, and it's also, I think if you know, we've been doing this many years, and you have radar, which is out there, and you detect almost immediately if someone is listening or not. You know,
sure.
Once you get under it, it can be from the first note. You think,
yeah, definitely.
Just the way it was shaped, the way it was thrown into the mix, you can normally have a good idea whether something's going to work or not. And I think it's important to have, as we always say, you know, you've got to have the ego to be able to make the sound in the first place. You've got to be able to know your instrument. I prefer to think it's kind of useful to know the instrument well. You know, there is a school of thought that says don't do all that study because it blows your mind. But you know, but I find the other way, I think that to have the technique to be able to realize something that comes in your head immediately, it used to be a good idea.
Yeah, I agree.
Improvise. I think the understanding already how the interact.
Yeah.
There have been situations where you realize that, you know, maybe part of the band is not listening. They're doing their thing. And there's you've got to have, the ego is probably beating the humility. I think you've got to have humility as well to be able to sort of get this balance. You know, you've got to be able to back off, decode what's going on, mentally, instrumentally, with psychologically. You know, all of these things are taking place in microseconds.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
This is what it's also very exciting, of course. It can be held sometimes, but you know, when it's at its best, it's amazing.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Now, I also wanted to ask you this. You know, I sent you this. Speaking of impros, like you've been doing this like since the late '60s, and you know. Played with Howard Riley. I love that trio. That's probably one of my favorite trios ever. And you know, John Stevens, Spontaneous Music, and you go a really long way with Evan Parker also. And I wanted to ask you about your connection with Evan and Paul. And in general, like this improvising scene that was happening in the UK in the late '60s. How did this kind of develop, and how did this mold together? When did you meet all these guys, and how did the scene started for you, especially in the late '60s? And your story with Evan, especially.
Yeah. Okay. So there's accidents happen in life, and the accident for me was to get involved in improvised music. I mean, it was the best accident that could ever happen. No, but basically, where it started was almost at the end of my transition from leaving school, my secondary school, going to the architect's office and working there. But I was doing a sort of moonlighting, but playing. I suppose I was trying to. At school, we had a little jazz band, which actually turned into what you might call a swing band, with Benny Goodman type stuff, Sidney Bechet stuff, and we were playing in what we call the working men's clubs in the area, and these working men's clubs were basically drinking houses for working men at the factories, and they would be every so often when the pints got too many, they would want to sing. So we had to come to standards as well. But then I realized that my dad, who was not at all musical, but he brought me home one day, Riverside Giants of Jazz. His boss at work had a sort of a small interest in American jazz, and so Horace Silver and Thelonious Monk, and it was a kind of a sampler for Riverside Records. And then when I first heard this, I thought, wow, this is amazing. I've never heard anything like this before. And this took me on to sort of the next stage. I thought, I better start looking into this. So, but at the same time, as I was working with the architects, wondering what to do in life, sort of thing, I was doing composition lessons part-time, what we call part-time things. At Goldsmiths College, there was a composition course there, and I used to go, I suppose, every week to find out about other musics, and this is what about the American avant-garde, John Cage, Earl Brown, Merce Cunningham in the dance area, all that sort of 50s experimental music. And I wrote a piece. We had to write a piece at the end of each year of study. I wrote a piece which actually had most of the composers who were also musicians in the ensemble, and I had a friend who was doing the standards with me, a guy called Bernard Living. He was an alto saxophone player who played with the Mike Westbrook band. He was, and he seemed to know, I don't know, he seemed to know so much about everything, about photography, about art, about music. I don't even know where he picked all this stuff up from. But anyway, I was mightily influenced by this. So I wrote the piece. He was going to play the alto saxophone, and I was told there was a trombone player. I wanted a trombone player in the piece because I seem to remember the trombone player dropped out. So I was told about this fellow called Paul Rutherford, who happened to be living just around the corner from me, but I didn't know too much about it. So about him, they just told me where to find him. So I went straight to the pub, found him in the pub drinking some beer, and say, Paul, I'm Barry. I want a trombone player for my piece. Now, Bernard was supposed to play the alto, but he decided in the end he wanted to conduct. So I had to find an alto player. So I went back to the pub a few days later. I said, Paul, do you know any alto players? And he said, well, I work with Trevor Watts. And so Trevor came in, Paul came in. We did this piece. It wasn't a very good piece, but it had two improvised cadenzas in it, one for the alto and one for the trombone. So I let these guys get on with it. I thought, wow, this is amazing. And I added the bass into one of them. So I played along with them. A few weeks later, I got the call from John Stevens saying, come up to the Little Theatre Club. Trevor and Paul said, you've got some potential as a player or something. So I didn't know anything about the Little Theatre Club, climbed the stairs in St. Martin's Lane, and it's a tiny little place, and it all seemed to be highly mysterious, and I didn't quite know what was going on. This is I'm kind of pushing time together here in a way, because time, And anyway, as they say, the rest is history. I went up there and started playing and with the guys, and I thought, this is really weird. It's nothing like those Riverside Giants of Jazz, which I've been listening to and trying to. This is where I learned about Mingus and Bonnie Griffin, big soul band, and that was where I was sort of thinking I was feeling comfortable, and I was working with a guy called Bob Downs, who's still around. I mean, he's a saxophone player that eventually joined the London Jazz Composers Orchestra. But he was working with the dance company. I was working with. We worked together as a trio in that before I did solo pieces for the London Contemporary Dance Theatre. So there was Bob Downs was more out of Rollins, and I was kind of really thinking I should hang on to that music, whereas the Little Theatre Club seemed to be throwing you any idea what it was about, you know, except using my ears. Anyway, you know, it was really like a workshop. We would play. We would go to the pub afterwards, or we'd go to the pub before we played normally, and then the next day or a few days later we get together again. John would have analysed the gig. He would say, "Barry, you're playing too much," and Trevor would say, you know, play a little slower or something. And so, you know, there was this kind of analytics in a way about performance, because everybody was experimenting, trying to find ways of working together. There were heads as well. Some Trevor wrote some things, Rutherford wrote some things. John Stevens had some kind of rhythmic ideas which he would throw at us. So there was this build-up of a kind of an open music, and I think this was I found it immensely mixture of frustrating, exciting, and you know, what is this a life? and then sometimes I get a call from John Stevens. They say, "Barry, don't come in this week." No, you played horrible the other day. So and we'll see how we get on. So there was this invitation, disinvitation. So it was a tense time, but I came across during this process. I came across Evan, of course, and Paul Lytton, and of course Evan was in the spontaneous music ensemble. Of course, John Stevens was the drummer, but Lytton was came up to the Little Theatre Club and worked away there, and we liked the way he worked. But then Evan and Paul got together as a duo. They were doing a lot of duos together. I kind of gravitated towards Rutherford's Iskra, 1903 with Derek, of course, and or Amalgam with Trevor Watts. Yeah. And but also there became this trio with John Stevens and Trevor Watts, and we did a lot of what they call the Phoenix. I think it was the Phoenix sessions, which was just basically a pub with a stage at the end, and we used to every week over in Brixton in South London. We did a kind of a regular playing there, and we recorded, and it all terribly exciting, you know. But with all these different, everybody had what was really exciting for me was that everybody had a very clear idea of what they wanted to do. I mean, you know, they had so much. The bedfellows sometimes, you know, and sometimes they just wanted their thing to happen, but all the time it was being moderated by John Stevens and Trevor and Paul working on this idea of collective. So you had to have this ego, heavy energy, but you also had to find a humility to work together, give each other time. But it was a huge contradiction in some ways, you know, because you had to give time, but on the other hand, you wanted to do what you wanted to do, and everybody wanted to do what they wanted to do. And every little ensemble that came out of the spontaneous music ensemble had a characteristic. I mean, it was interesting. Rutherford got a bit pissed off with drummers. So this is why we started Iskra 1903.
Yeah, sure.
Wanted 2 strings and trombone and no drums. You know, leave the drums out; they're noisy. So that was some of the thinking that went on, you know. So that kind of developed its own way, and I love that. It was almost orchestral at times, you know, when Derek was playing.
Yeah, man, that's incredible. Yeah.
And you had all these sounds that reminded me of some of the. I know Derek was very interested in Anton Webern, for instance. And Schoenberg, but Webern in particular, that kind of spare, precise music, and that reflected in his playing. And I think someone once sent me, there seems to be a notebook from Derek somewhere.
Really?
Where marks a lot of these things down about intervals, which was this kind of.
Oh wow!
I don't know where it is. I might, if I ever find it, I'll send it to you.
Oh man, please!
It was sent to me. It was just rough notes about intervals. guitar patterns, and but I think there was some note rows of Webern, Anton Webern in there as well. So it was kind of interesting because it did come out in the music in some ways where he was articulating the guitar.
Yeah.
And it felt, for me, it was as if we were like a real chamber ensemble.
Yeah, it sounded like, many times,
And I remember there was we did a concert, I think it was at possibly the Queen Elizabeth or one of those sort of classical venues, and it was part of a modern music series. It was attended by various critics, one of them being Peter. Now I forget his last name now. Anyway, he was the critic of the Daily Telegraph, the contemporary music book. So we played. I got a call from this guy. I heard your concert the other day. Where is the score for this concert? And I said, well, actually, Iskra 1903 is a purely improvising group. Everything is improvised. There's no scores, nothing. It's just, this cannot be. This cannot be. I said, you have to have a score to play this kind of music. I said, no, the reason we play this kind of music is because we don't have scores. And he said, I'm writing up at your concert and I need to see the music before I make a final decision on what I write. I said, well, you won't find it. So anyway, I said, goodbye. Peter. Anyway, I think he was actually a very well-known pianist that played a lot of Schoenberg and those 12-note guys in the early days. The interesting thing is that there was a review in the Telegraph a few days later, and he absolutely wiped the slate with it. I mean, he just kind of wiped us off the face of the earth, saying this is the worst music I've ever heard in my life. But when the phone call came, he said this was one of the best musics I ever heard.
Oh man, come on!
Because there was no score. He said that he was a man that hated improvisation. So anyway, that was just one of those little moments of irritation.
Yeah, you can imagine in the beginning. Yeah, it must have been in the 70s, like probably late 60s. What you guys started doing, that was
but the guy just couldn't get his head around it. So anyway, all of these little groups. I mean, I think that sort of explains a little bit how these little ensembles came about, because it was fragmentation as well as coming together as well as breaking up. So the trio with Evan and Paul. Well, Paul and Evan were a duo, and at some point I suppose it was 83 or something, perhaps. I can't remember when it precisely started. Evan would know because he remembers all these things, but he just got a call to come and play in a trio formation with him and Paul, and we've stuck together ever since, on and off, probably more off than on, but we try and do what we can, and it's always a great joy to play with these guys, because it never stops. It never feels if it stops developing. There's always something new, a different sequence. Even if we know each other very, very well, what we're finding is new ways to articulate the music, which is always exciting. So as long as it's like that, then we're happy.
Yeah.
So it's great working with these fellows, and also I think the other thing is that they're both players, or in fact all of these players, were developing their own instrumental articulations, which actually were breaking all the boundaries. So which actually was interesting, how there's kind of a knock-on effect. You have to find ways to respond, and to do that sometimes you have to take the instrument to another place, as well as your brain, as well as your ears.
Sure.
I mean, sometimes Evan and I used to, when we've done a few duos together, where sometimes we find it almost mysterious how some of the music, it can be so fast and so together. We can just be going along. Stop. Yeah. Who said that? I mean, who turned the light off, sort of thing, And so we have a different way of hearing each other. I think that's probably the slowest way to hear, through your ears, but through your body, your feeling, energy around you. So it's going through your bones. So we're kind of, you might call us receivers, or sort of a bit like the dish on top of well, no longer, but there used to be dishes outside that brought the signals in.
Yeah.
So that's sort of what that's the type of reactions you have, which can be so fast. We don't even know who thought of it.
Yeah, almost telepathic in a way. Then if you use this term, almost, let's say. Yeah.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Anyway, so I think you mentioned here with Marilyn and Paul, of course. Since the Howard Riley was the first piano trio.
I loved it. This is such an underrated band, really. I mean, it's because it sounds so fresh, like everyone's talking about. I mean, I love the trio: Bill Evans, Paul Motion, Scott LaFaro, let's say. Sure. But this trio, man, it's, it sounds so fresh even now when I listen to those albums. It's just like, man, such incredible playing.
Well, I suppose, it went through, like most ensembles, they develop, they take on a different direction, according to whether there's a compositional element or whether there's a completely free element. Once we had Alan Jackson in the original trio, which was, and we were both, Howard and I were interested in writing for the piano trio, and we were heavily influenced early on by the Bill Evans, Paul Motion, that kind of way of playing. But it wasn't trying to imitate that particular Evans, Motions, LaFaro trio, but what the lessons were, the freedom of response. And Evans, all of their repertoire was based upon standards or things he wrote, and they were heavy chord sequences to kind of deal with, and but what they seemed to do, it was to kind of find this transparency of time.
Right? The time and rhythm, especially. Yeah.
And it was based upon the rhythmic principles, but LaFaro were doing these crazy. I mean, it just where the guy got this gift from, I don't know. Tragedy to have lost him so young, because I found it incredibly moving. And Gary Peacock also with
Peacock the same.
Way they found the spaces in between the notes, so to speak, and there was something almost mysterious about it, which actually, if you let that kind of envelop you, that you can't help but think this is a most beautiful way of playing. So I think with Howard, I think he had quite an influence. He was quite influenced by Paul Bley to start with as well.
Sure, yeah.
But in terms of the trio, we were kind of interested to see how compositionally our different approaches could work in the trio format. Then Alan, I don't know what the circumstances were, but Alan Jackson sort of left the trio, and Oxley was then brought in. Because of the association of the Little Theatre Club. And sort of once Oxley came in, then the whole thing started changing. It went to a much more, you might say, abstract, open improvisational format. And but all the time, there's certain things I was getting on very well with Oxley because I liked his dynamic playing. That was really exciting, and he was pushing Howard to find other ways of articulating the piano much more. Howard was pulling out some really quite remarkable sonorities from the piano, but based upon the extension of that sort of Evans, Paul Bley area. But and then of course Howard went on to do lots and lots of solo records as well. So he developed that end of things when the trio ceased to be sort of active. And I can't even remember why we became inactive, but it was probably something to do with me getting involved with other music. So we got heavily into Baroque music.
And the London jazz composers then started at the same time. Yeah, sure.
So actually, you mentioned something about London Jazz Orchestra. So there was, you know, these early days, late 60s, 70s, early 70s. Well, you know, I had this most remarkable, I suppose, what would I call it? Schooling, working with all these guys, you know. So the formation of the LJCO was really to bring all the, as a kind of a recognition of how everybody was kind of kind to me, because I was a bit late on the scene. Involved all sorts of people, from the Little Theatre Club, but from Bob Downs, and I just somehow there was a whole raft of people that came through my life, and I wanted to somehow make a big celebration of saying, thank you guys, thank you very much for putting up with me. I'm going to write a piece, and that piece was Ode. So it was in a way, it was a manifestation of my studies in terms of composition, but it was also a big thank you and an appreciation of all these wonderful talents. So this is why it was such a long piece, a 7-part piece, which actually featured all the people, or tried to feature, I think I managed it, almost everybody, feature everybody in this rather weighty composition. So, but let's say the whole process of putting it together was mind-blowingly difficult. I had my composition professor from the Guildhall School of Music, Buxton, for 10 years he conducted the ensemble. I suppose I was very pleased that he was doing that, because he was not only a great composer, he was also a doctor of psychology. So when you have to deal with Derek Bailey and Tony Oxley and all of that kind of heavyweight guys all hating the fact that to have to follow a conductor, that's the first thing, and then to read music, that is something else. So you know, they had, these poor guys were faced with this monumental composition, which they probably hated every single bit of it. But the remarkable thing was the result. They somehow, when it came down to it, there was the music was extraordinary. What they managed, and some people didn't read that well. For me, it was easy. You know, I've been doing composition. I've been playing Beethoven and Mozart at college, and so reading music and reading Xenakis and Berio and Schoenberg, etc., etc. So it was, for me, it was all one big happy family, you know, of music. But for some of these guys, it was actually perilous. You know, you
can imagine.
Really hated it. You know, and some of the rehearsals, I've got some cassettes. Remember those? Some cassettes of rehearsals, because
seriously,
I recorded them to try and give me an idea of how we were doing. But they were so chaotic. But there's Buxton shouting over, saying, "Tony, shut up! Guys, come back from the tea, please." You know, just to get everybody to be in the same place at the same time. It was an asylum, really. It was unbelievable. But when it came around to doing the concert, it was most extraordinary that the music somehow came together. You know, people somehow knuckled down, even if there were stakes. But because everybody was an improviser, there was always a solution. So, each kind of iteration of the LJCO, every time there were different pieces, there would be different problems. And for 10 years, I say, Buxton managed to control this madhouse. And I just kept my head down. I said, I'm only the bass player. So I let him deal with everybody. So, but you know, it was pretty, it was tricky at times. But you know, hell, if when I hear back at some of the things that we accomplished, I'm astounded, actually. I don't know how they happened, but they did. So just as well.
No, I wanted to catch you here, Barry, with asking you this, like, in all your bands, like, even, you know, the New Orchestra or the Blue Shroud Band or the the London jazz composers, when you see the players you have in those groups, it's incredible musicians who are themselves leaders, writers, improvisers, composers, and everything, virtuosos on their instruments. And how do you cope with that? Let's say later, when you kind of more took over also the entire thing, how do you cope with all these musicians as a leader and to keep them quiet and to present the music? Like, did it get easier through the years, or is it now easier? Like,
it's probably easier now. Certainly with the Blue Shroud Band, that's because there was a particular direction I wanted to go there. I wanted, for instance, I wanted a saxophone quartet. I mean, I tried lots of before putting this together, but it was I was kind of influenced by well, actually, now if I think here, I'm just going to show you something.
Oh, please.
Oh yeah, here's. I mean, this is. I'm just going to place that. Can you see that?
Yeah.
There's a whole load of sort of boxes and lines.
Yeah.
Here. And what I wanted to do in the formation of this band was to actually work out who had played with whom at some point and in what ensemble. So this was an analysis of who had worked with whom. One of the priorities I definitely wanted a saxophone quartet sound because of orchestrating some of these the Baroque music pieces, but I wanted them to work like a string quartet. And say, for instance, Torben Schneckstadt, an amazing saxophone player, but had his own saxophone quartet, and they did arrangements of old music as well as contemporary music of Mendelssohn. He did, but the group he had, I think it was, what was it called? Was it called the Stockholm Saxophone? He's Norwegian, but I think it, no, it wasn't Stockholm, was it? And he was living in Copenhagen. The important thing is that he was a leader. I mean, he knew how to, like a string quartet, first violin. The whole thing, the whole progress of coming together and blending is a lot to do with the leader and the kind of mindset of the players. So I wanted a similar type of reaction from saxophone players. So Torben seemed to me just the right person to lead this quartet of instruments. I got to know Mikael Niesemann, who was a very famous Baroque oboe player with John Eliot Gardner's English Baroque soloists, and he's a very well-known teacher of oboe, Baroque oboe as well as modern oboe. But I got to know him as a saxophone player when we did some work at his music institution in Germany. So it was kind of interesting that he pulled me in to prepare a piece with his improvising musicians also, as well as doing straight stuff. There was some improvisers there. Now, Julius Gabriel, the baritone player in the Blue Shroud Band, was a pupil of Mikael Niesemann, and they kind of, according to whatever piece I was playing, they sometimes swapped. But sometimes Mikael would play baritone, and sometimes Julius would play a tenor or a soprano or something. And I thought, well, these two guys know each other very well, and they understand the kind of the sensibility of working together as like a straight. Per Texas Johansson I worked with in a band in Sweden, a big band, and I thought this guy's plays, you know, he can play the rhythmic stuff, he can play straight. He plays the clarinet as well, which is another interesting mix. So to pull together all of these four, suddenly everything was that was, you know, the first building block in this. So, and what I wanted with this first piece, Blue Shroud. I mean, I wanted a string sound in there. So the string sound I wanted would be the violin, viola. So there was Maya there, and her colleague, one or two colleagues, and will play the viola. I will play the bass. Benjamin Dwyer, which I mentioned, will play the guitar. I wanted the guitar because I remember this album of Charles Mingus. I think it was Mingus, 5-pound Mingus thing. And he had in some of his compositions, with his big band, he plays acoustic guitar, a Berliner, and it was just such an amazing color change.
Yeah,
you had this incredible heavy Mingus music, and suddenly you had this sort of almost flamenco-like guitar breakthrough. And I thought, this is the most amazing sound. But I wanted to try and find a guitarist that could take care of, because I wanted to use some old music in it, the Bieber slow movements from the Bieber mystery sonatas. I also, at some point, I decided on the Agnus Dei from the B minor Mass of Bach. So I needed to have somebody that could play continuo, i.e. Baroque continuo, could play contemporary guitar, could play flamenco, and he covered it all. It was amazing. So he was the kind of a real focus for the color, and to balance up the whole kind of orchestration of this, I like the tuba. So I like that sort of heavy brass thing at the bottom, but to balance that up, I wanted the trumpet in there, and of course Augusti Fernandez, my wonderful piano partner. He can play anything, really.
Sure.
I mean, such an amazing player. So that was actually quite, that was where the ensemble was coming together. Now, also we have two drummers, Lucas Nigli and Ramon Lopez. Now we have a trio with Augusti and Ramon, piano trio. So I thought it would be very good to get that kind of integration into the Blue Shroud band. But I wanted Lucas Nigli, who I've been working with a lot over here, because he technically, he can play some really kind of, he can move anywhere between rock music and contemporary music, and he does all of that now. So I thought we have two different types of drummers here, and they're going to express different things. So I could actually start balancing the whole band up in terms of known ensembles, particular colors which we've established over the years. So suddenly it all started to come together. So the whole reason for me for the Blue Shroud band working is the way that I got all the people that I was hoping for. But when they all came together, it was like a love-in.
Sure.
Everybody just got on well with each other. Technically, there was never any problems about the reading. A lot was that, by rehearsing a lot, the band, the technical aspect tightens up. But as people get comfortable with the music, then the improvisations get freer.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Tightening and at the same time opening out. It's almost a bit like a wooden house. If you use green oak and you put beams together and you put pegs in there, as the wood dries out, as the wood starts to shake and twist. So all those sort of things happening, but it's getting tighter all the time. So it has a lot of sort of redundancy built in, so things can go wrong. But because it's tightening, everything's going to hang together. So we have that's sort of reason. And then and just to show you one more of these things, here was another one there. This is sort of the original sketch for the Blue Shroud.
Oh man, that's beautiful.
And this is an analysis of Guernica, the painting, and there is this kind of triangular aspect to it. There's something almost classical in these pillars that hold the whole thing up, and I think here you can see some kind of tension diagrams, and and of course, with Kerry Hardy, the poet that provided me with the 9 poems, you can see that I had a sort of a structure which was actually kind of forming itself, not only from the point of view of the players, but also from the point of view of the words and the structure of the piece. So it was all kind of, there was a lot of kind of analysis that went on to somehow keep everything in motion. I think probably one of the hardest things to do in the Blues Trail band was, in terms of composition, was to prepare those moments for the Baroque pieces to come in. You know, because it's not for sure that you can just put a piece.
It just doesn't pop in. Yeah.
And the Agnus Dei from the B minor Mass, one of the most famous pieces and most beautiful pieces ever written. I decided that I talked to Savina, and sorry, I hadn't mentioned Savina yet. Savina, of course, is absolutely crucial to this whole presentation. She's Greek. Her English is great, so she understood the poetry, but she has this wild voice, which can go between hysterical and beauty, you know. And so she has this huge repertoire. So absolutely crucial to the whole. So, but I decided with the Agnus Dei that I talked to her about it. She said, to be honest, there's so many beautiful recordings of the Agnus Dei out classically or barockery or out. She said, I don't think I could do anything. I couldn't improve on any of these. So I said, okay. So the original orchestration was for because of the tessitura, the oboe wouldn't fit, so I did it. I wrote it for an oboe d'amore, which actually would go down to the lower notes of the required in the Agnus Dei. But practically, it was very difficult for Michael to play virtually a whole concert. Then pick up the oboe d'amore with a double reed, and then play this beautiful melody. Because it would have dried out. So I said, can you play it on the alto sax? So he said, yeah, I can do that. So I reorchestrated it with the alto. So he plays the melody beautifully. I mean, it's fantastic. So we got around that little tricky little problem. So again, you know, his alto playing is absolutely straight. So as if it comes straight out the conservatoire. It's expressive. It's this classical expressive way. So this is the whole. Very often, for me to put a band together, it is not just I want this and that and that. It's all to do with people. It's all to do with the musicians. That's where everything starts.
Yeah. But Barry, I wanted to ask you one thing. You mentioned poetry, right? And
yes,
I'm really interested.
Yeah, you're a PhD.
Yeah, okay, but no, I love poetry, and you know, I studied it and I translated a lot of it. And I wanted to ask you, how do you? I know you are used Beckett a lot, or other poetry, Mallarmé or whoever. How do you approach transforming a poem into music? I mean, how does this happen for you? Like, how do you find which poem you want to do? And how does this process go with you in your mind? I mean, like.
Okay. Well, look, I tell you, there are various sort of, for me, generators of compositional processes. One is painting. The other is words or poetry. And another is architecture. Now, I can show you something here.
Oh, please, yeah.
Now, I don't know whether I'm just going to show you this. This is Un coup de dé. Can you see that?
Yeah. Beautiful.
That is the youth. So this was for the Hilliard ensemble, vocal group, 4 guys, and but basically this is. What I did in this case was take Malame's poem, and I think I've got it marked here. Yeah. Un coup de dé, jamais ne volera le hasard. Now, I'm just going to show you the first couple of pages here. As it says, the text that follows is to be read across 2 pages. So we have here, here's the, can you see that?
Yeah, super. Yeah, super.
Right. So what we have is a dice throw, never, and if we turn over, we have, where is it here? From the, yeah, dice throw, never. And this is in the uppercase lettering.
Yeah.
So we've got this kind of graphic representation in uppercase and lowercase.
Yeah.
So what I did was to take all of the take all of the uppercase lettering. I'm just going to show you that. So this was it says a dice throw, never, whether the master will abolish, as if chance, nothing will have taken place except the place, except perhaps a constellation. Every thought gives off a dice throw. So we've got that un coup de dé, jamais soit le maître, comme si le hasard, etc. So I've just used at the uppercase comments from Malame and made a new story here. I don't know whether you.
Yeah, I see it. Yeah, I see it. Super.
So now, that's the words. Now I need to start somewhere. So it starts here, and then finishes in with this.
Yeah.
Now here's the dice, simulation of the dice here, which is turning. On the face of this dice, you have some pitches, some pitch areas, which the singers relate to. So they're expanding. These pitch areas are expanding. Then it goes to silence, and then sorry, I was going to this continues here. It takes a particular direction with the dice getting to the bottom here, with the pages of individual pages over a black void, which is like an improvisation. So, but then it's moving. Then it goes like a loop. It turns out it goes back to the beginning.
Incredible. Yeah.
Okay, what's it? Sorry, Maya. We are just talking about some compositional things. Now, sorry, we're having a burglar alarm fitted.
Oh.
They needed to test it or something.
Okay.
Anyway, wait for it. So, so the idea for that presentation came from architecture.
Yeah.
And that architecture was, this is a particular building that neither of these buildings were built, but the American architect called Peter Eisenman. This was called the Max Reinhardt House, and it was actually based on the idea of a Möbius loop, where the building actually crystalline. It was like a crystal, and it twists and then comes to the other influence in the layout of this was this building by Richard Rogers Partnership. It was to be built in Japan, and it was called the Tomigaya Exhibition Space. And basically, what you've got is a lot of modules here, and these floors are supposed to move up and down. So you can have all sorts of different exhibitions. Here's the model they made of it.
Oh wow!
It was never finished, but this is very much Rogers with these are like dice you see on.
I see that. Yeah.
And these things move. So, and you also have this this gantry here holding the whole roof section up. So it actually goes through the space and holds everything up. So for me, what I wanted to present here was almost a Möbius.
No, yeah.
So it actually goes around and comes back on itself and finishes here. So, and then we have all these kind of modules, which are a bit like these modules here, which are the turning. So it relates to the dice, the turning of the dice. So that was just merely a way of explaining how Malame with architecture ends up as a piece.
Beautiful. Yeah, beautiful.
Any sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. Yeah, but it's a lot of work you put into a project like this. Then, like, it's an immense study and preparation, right?
A lot of it is preparation. I mean, something like, just to show you one more. Now, this was a piece that I read for the New Orchestra Workshop in Canada, and it's big. This is the score.
Oh wow!
You can see that, and you see there's a lot of symbols and colors.
Yeah.
Words here. We had a singer in the band.
Yeah.
So what I did with this piece, it was for an improvising band, but I wanted to have modules that could be referenced at any time. So this all came from this particular picture of a painter called Alan Davey, who I was good friends with, and we played together with Oxley. Actually, he was a pianist as well as being an artist. But basically, I took each one of these signs, and gave it a musical character. So, for instance, you can see possibly. That this is a kind of a tam-tam, which I always gave to the percussionists, and here's the tutti. So under, say, up at the top here, we've got a thing called the tutti, the group. So there are the various manifestations of this. There's number one, here's number two, there's number three somewhere, three, and number four is, where's number four? Somewhere around here. There is a number four. There's five. I'm losing four at the moment. Anyway, but these are particular types of chords that we play. These are improvisations. Here's a cadenza for the singer, and he refers to these words here, which are the words by Alan Davey. He was a poet as well as a player, and so that all kind of informs, or how poetry or words in a way come from a painting, plus the bits of the painting, and end up as a sort of another version of the painting. So that's well, I've got other things.
Incredible, beautiful.
So, but what I have to say is that one of the which I haven't really discussed so much is that we've mentioned a little bit about Maya's work in all of this. You know, we have a duo together, and I've written stuff.
Sure.
And but you know, when we first met, she took the helm of looking after the LJCO, and she got, I think in the first year she took over, she got us 12 concerts, which was,
oh man, wow, that's
I don't think I managed that in the whole of my life. So, you know, none of this stuff that you would have seen so far would have been. I mean, she's my I call her my white stick. You know, she guides me. So I'm very, very fortunate together with Maya, and I mean, you know, she's just an angel, fantastic, and she puts up with me putting all these scores together, and you know, losing a lot of money in the process.
Yeah, well, being a band leader and a composer, man, especially, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. But beautiful, very well, so beautiful. Anyway,
that was just to give you a little insight into, you know, so how the paintings and the poetry end up being music in the end. So it's a, but you know, we mentioned Beckett. You recently, a few years ago, we used to run a little festival in Ireland, and there was a great Irish actor, the Barry McGoffin, who read what is Beckett's last poem called "What Is the Word," and it is the most gorgeous poem. He had me in tears, really. But I was commissioned to do a piece for the Kronos String Quartet.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah, you wrote that. Yeah.
I use "What Is the Word" as the structure for the piece. So in this string quartet, we have the words actually going through the piece, but they I kind of analyzed the text and broke it down into cells, which actually generate a certain type of music. So, I mean, just in a simple thing, there's something with a blue mark around here.
Yeah.
And it's even though this is a string quartet, but it has the words of the poem. So this is folly. This is the first word of the poem. Folly. Folly for two. Folly. What is the word? Folly. So each of these things actually generates a piece of music.
Yeah.
And here and here. So that has now been translated into a piece for the Blue Shroud Band. And it's it's here. So I've used some of the principles of the construction, but the words actually finally come to us because Savina Yanatu is going to read the poem in French. She's going to sing and improvise. Then it comes at the end in English. So you have the two versions of it. Because it was originally written in French, it was translated later. So what is the word has left this quartet, and there's now an hour-long piece for the Blue Shroud Band. So it's very very exciting. So I know the ladies are going to have a great time. Now,
beautiful, cool. That's amazing.
Have you got enough?
Sorry.
Do you have enough here?
Yeah, I will not bother you anymore, Barry. Thank you so much for sharing all these thoughts. It's beautiful to hear that, to see a glimpse of your mind. We could have talked for hours, I think, because, but just we do part 2 next year or something like that. So.
Okay, there's a few more things I can show you, because I've got all of these things. One thing I do every year, I build a house just to keep my 3-dimensional architectural mind in place. I build a little model house for Maya every year based upon found objects which I pick up anywhere over the year.
Oh man!
So last year's Christmas was. I'll just show you this one. This was the.
Oh wow!
This year's model, and it's actually the idea is when they brew beer they have these oast houses where they dry the hops. Well, this is the sort of oast house, and the I don't know what I can put.
Yeah, I see it. Yeah.
Now the whole roof actually comes off. There's poetry inside.
Oh
but
man!
The idea is this can turn around, moves around. Yeah. Inside there's always. There's the original sort of oast houses. This is where the inspiration comes from. So she's got about 14 of these models. Which,
wow!
Some of them are buildable, some not. But it's all found objects. So all of these round areas here, this, that, and these, these were sort of cardboard tubes.
Yeah. But
they were this big. So I cut them in half. And now these represent the spaces here.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
So that's what I get up to 2 days before Christmas because it's her birthday, 17th December. So I close the door and I go into three-dimensional mode to pull a little house out. It's kind of it's an interesting discipline. It's not musical, but it's
that's like meditation almost. Yeah, I can imagine.
You bet. That's right. Yeah. Very meditation. So anyway, that could be part 2 because I could show you some more. See when it's a bit like taking the poetry
Yeah.
And then bring art together and ending up something else. So this is all these found objects. They're a big pile of pieces, which actually, over 2 days, kind of transform themselves into a place, a little habitation.
Yeah.
So there we are.
That's incredible. Well, thank you so much for sharing all these things, Barry.
Thank you very much for your time. Sorry it was so long, but
oh no, please! I'm so happy. It's so beautiful to talk to you and to listen to you. You have so much history and music that you've done and everything. So it's beautiful to share some of this. So I appreciate it. Okay.
Well, long may it continue. And look after you.
Yes, you too. Hope to see you soon somewhere.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Yeah, take care.
Ciao. You too.
Dr. Jazz.